Pursuing profit for profit's sake alone is a problem. Is the purpose of business to maximize profit, or is it to make profit, employ people, and serve customers and contribute to society? I believe innovation is only good when it serves the common good. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something.
Can we pause just for a minute to talk about the implications of this? Proceed as collective humanity in a way that might be beneficial for all. Is the purpose of work just financial gain? And what does that look like moving forward? Is it going to free people up to do meaningful things together, be reunified around work, or is it going to fragment it even further?
Welcome to At the Table, the podcast that lives at the intersection between teamwork, leadership, organizational health, and culture. I'm Pat Lencioni, your host, joined by my regular trusty host, Cody Thompson. How are you today, Cody?
I'm doing great, Pat.
That's good, because we have, I think, is one of the most important episodes we've ever done. I think it's going to be a little bit controversial or nuanced, but really important for what's going on in society right now. Cody, what is that?
We're calling it efficiency versus humanity.
That's right. Efficiency versus humanity. We purposefully, Cody, did not put the words AI or artificial intelligence in the title because most of us are really tired of hearing about AI and we're confused by it. You know, I mean, when we talk about AI, people are like, is that ChatGPT or is that almost sentient robot making decisions about how to run the world? And we don't even know when people use this term AI what we're talking about. So it becomes almost impossible to draw any conclusions. And we today, because we're a podcast about culture and the workplace and organizations, want to talk about the problem with artificial intelligence as a threat to the workplace and the dignity of jobs.
Yeah, and I think every episode we open up with, we talk about how work and culture coincide with dignity and organizational health. And so I think this falls squarely into the types of conversations that we often have with each other, but about leadership and about building businesses and what does that look like? And what's the whole purpose of this entire thing? Is it just enterprise and dollars, or is there something different going on?
Yeah. And, we are free market people. We realize a free market is the best thing, and freedom, democracy, and letting the markets work and rewarding people based on merit and profit as a motive is a good thing. And we think innovation and all of that is good. However, without a true north, without an understanding of what is this all about, even the free market will go off the rails. And in the past, we've had other innovations, Cody, that people were concerned about what that would do to society. And like the Industrial Revolution, it's like, oh, this is going to put all farmers out of work and machines are going to replace people. But it didn't. It just made us more effective at certain things and changed the nature of jobs from one kind of work to another, right? And we look back and we say we can feed more people and there are still farmers and people that work on farms, but there's ways that we can get things done more effectively. And then computers came about, I know, in our lifetime, and people were like, oh no, it's going to eliminate the need for human beings. And I think what they were thinking about at the time was this dystopian concern that we're encountering today. But of course, this didn't happen 30, 40 years ago when everybody thought it would. It led to a whole different economy and new ability to get things done. But today, as we look at artificial intelligence, it's so tempting for people to say, well, this is just going to be another innovation that leads to a different kind of job. And I am concerned that this one's different. I am concerned that what's driving this and the nature of artificial intelligence is actually going to displace so much of work, entry-level work and other kinds of jobs, and it's going to have a profound impact on our society and our economy. And that we're watching this happen in real time, and we need to really understand it better and do something about it.
Yeah, and I like what you said up front, Pat, because I think there's so many people, there's really two ways people engage with just this topic. Sometimes it's like, oh, hey, you're old and you think, this is just the same story all over again. I think the term is like a Luddite, right? That a group of people in England that started destroying machinery and like cotton and woolen factories because they thought it was going to take their jobs. And there's this camp of people that say, oh, well, you guys just are, technology is going to advance and it has all these great benefits. And then there's the other people that say like, wait, we should not do this for reasons that are maybe even more controversial than just saying like, let's take stock and see what our North Star is. And I think like even the idea of calling this into question, people tend to fall into one of those two camps. Like, hey, we want to have a conversation about it. We want to have a conversation about the value of work and what that means aside from just free market economies, and what does that mean for human beings in general. And for people to not quickly put us in one of those two or react in one of those two ways, right? Because
Yeah.
I think the best thing we can do as human beings is rediscern, take a step back and say like, is this good for humanity at large? And then go in with eyes wide open one way or another, instead of just falling into one of those two camps. So it's a little more
Right.
nuanced than that.
Yeah, and I think we it's important to understand that I believe innovation is only good when it serves the common good.
Yeah.
And there have been innovations that have actually been bad for people. And to quote from that very deep movie, Jurassic Park, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something.
Right.
And I think we might be in that time where people think, well, since we can, we should. And we really need to stop right now as a society and say, is everything we're doing with artificial intelligence good? Now, if we're using artificial intelligence to figure out how to cure a disease that's been impossible to cure, that's obviously good. If we're making tools that allow people to better serve their customers more effectively and efficiently, and preserving kind of the workplace as it is, but allowing them to do more, that generally feels pretty good. And I realize there's no easy line to draw, but it seems like what's going on right now in some businesses, and we're hearing about tens and hundreds of thousands of people being laid off, and the threats of more of this, is that companies are saying, we're already making a lot of money, but we could squeeze a little bit more margin out and actually make more profit if we replaced all the people with machines, robots, drones, or computer systems that make jobs obsolete. We could squeeze out a little bit more profit. And I think that leaders need to say, is that the right thing to do? And is the purpose of business, now we'll get very liberal artsy here, is the purpose of business to maximize profit, or is it to make profit and employ people and serve customers and contribute to society? And I think as a believer in the free market, we still have to have a true north. And pursuing profit for profit's sake alone is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Two things that I think about when you're saying that, Pat, because one of them is even pausing. It feels like there's this urgency, this race to see who can win, right? Like that's one of the reasons that we keep bringing this up is like, hey, can we pause just for a minute to talk about the implications of this?
Right.
And like we said, like proceed as human beings, collective humanity in a way that might be beneficial for all. So I think it's the race that feels really urgent. Like, hey, why are we moving so quickly in this direction without really discerning through all of the possible outcomes of this? And then I think the second point is what you just laid out is like, is the purpose of work just financial gain and eking out more margin? And you've said many times on this podcast, like we talked about this yesterday, that the word company, it means compagnia, to break bread together. And like there is this part when we talk about leadership and what it means to lead people, and we've done all these podcasts about management as a ministry and business as a ministry and human connection, that we believe there's dignity in having a job and having a job on a team and working together. And so even just posing that question of like, okay, so we're not saying, oh, hey, replace all the factory workers with machinery, and then all of a sudden, that's the end of humanity. Like, obviously, it freed people up to do meaningful work in a different way, in a different era. What does that look like moving forward? Is it going to free people up to do meaningful things together, and to be reunified around work, or is it going to fragment it even further?
And most of the commentary I've seen, Cody, says where this leads is to fewer people working, but those people making so much more money, and a whole big portion of the economy that's just wiped out and not working at all. And this is the crazy thing. Ultimately, what happens then is all of this technology leads to the destruction of customers, because it's those people that lose their jobs that pay to have toothpaste delivered by a drone to their front door in 12 minutes. Eventually, there's not going to be people that can pay for that because they don't have jobs. And it's almost like a suicide pact that's only being kept alive because people value their short-term convenience too much to say enough. I mean, I think we as consumers, I'm jumping kind of to the end here. I think we as consumers have to ask ourselves, should we stop patronizing companies that are profoundly disinterested in whether or not we continue to work? And when companies are laying people off, even though their profits are high, their margins are great, and they're like, but let's do more. And what we're doing is every time we buy that tube of toothpaste at a discount with a drone delivering it to our door, we're putting our neighbor out of work. Eventually, it's going to come back to us because there's going to be no customers. And it sounds crazy and dystopian, but that doesn't mean it's not happening.
I absolutely think that's one of the things we should consider, the consumer side of it. But I'm going to press into this a little more, and maybe even push back, because like I feel like the consumer is always on the hook. Like we have to not support this and not do this and and vote with our dollars or whatever else. I think the appeal is to leaders in organizations
absolutely.
to say like, you know what? Hey, don't make 100,000 of your constituents make the decision for you. Do the right thing at the top of the organization.
Yeah.
And let the effects of that play out for your customers, because it feels like the onus, and maybe I'm riled up because the Monday Night Football game was not on anything you can find because two giant organizations couldn't find a, agreement on a contract. It's like, so we have to sign up for more things to do, and so anyway, that's sort of beside the point, but I like the idea of saying, hey, no, let's appeal to the leaders at these organizations to say, what's your philosophy of work? Is it for the good of humanity? And is the endeavor that you're pushing forward in and leading all of the people that you lead in your organization moving towards human flourishing? And if it's not, let's have a whole different conversation about it.
You're absolutely right. So there's two things that are going on here. And like, let's talk about Amazon. Like the leaders of Amazon, I want them to ask themselves, is our desire to have stores where nobody works there and you just walk in and you have a chip and you put something in your bag and you walk out and it automatically charges you? That might seem cool to you, but I want you to ask yourself, is that really worth it where there's no human interaction and there's nobody that has a job? There's no kid that's first job is bagging groceries. There's nobody that gets to work at the grocery store. I don't get to interact with people. I have friends that work at the store when I go to the store and I have relationship with them. And is that scientific idea, like that sounds cool to you, is that really a good thing for people? And I do want the leaders to ask themselves that. And do you really need to eke out that much more margin, or are you just trying to dominate industry for the sake of dominating it? So I do want to appeal to leaders and to people that work in companies. And I want them to say, we need to rethink this. At the same time, I want to say to consumers, you're feeding the beast. And I'm looking forward to the day, Cody, when a grocery store puts up a sign that says, we have checkout clerks. Because every time I go to the grocery store, most people are like, this is crazy. The prices are still high. I have to check out my own groceries. People are stealing. I've read the statistics, the shrinkage, they call it, from people not paying for their groceries. But they're doing it just because they can. And what happened to, it's great to have employees and an experience when I go there. And I know this sounds like I'm against free markets and innovation, but I'm not. It's about humanity and about people having jobs and interacting with other people. So I want to appeal to the leaders, but I want to appeal to the consumers as well.
Yeah, I like that. In fact, I think, Pat, it wasn't that long ago, we highlighted a story of some Scandinavian supermarket chain that put the elderly extra time checkout clerks. So they said, like, do you want to have a conversation? You can go through this specific line where we will take longer and talk to you.
Oh, I didn't know about that. No, this is not, you and I have not talked to, that's awesome.
Maybe I heard about that on a different podcast, but either way, like, I think that that's a philosophical decision that was made at the top of the organization. You could juxtapose the Amazon leadership that you're talking about with this chain that's saying, like, you know what, a problem in our society was elderly people feel isolated and alone. And we can solve that And you know what they didn't do is I bet it cost them more to solve that problem. It wasn't about eking out more margin. They said, well, it's going to be the least efficient line in our store, but it's going to actually serve this population group that we want to serve. So I think that that's a different philosophy.
And that's exactly right. Is it ever right just to do what's right, even if it's not necessarily more efficient? Now, and the thing about this is we should be willing to do that. And the best businesses in the world aren't the ones that make the most money necessarily. They're the ones that make enough money to survive and to thrive and be sustainable, but will still make decisions that are not economically wise, but they're the right for humanity. Mm-hmm. However, having said that, darn it if I don't think most of the companies that make these decisions based on humanity don't get rewarded through loyalty and through the consistency of business. And I, for one, want to be the one that says, I'm going to drive by that store that's really trying to eliminate its competition and patronize a company that's actually trying to do things the right way. But this is why it comes down to true north, and is morality and ethics and virtue still a part of business?
I agree with you. I didn't mean to dismiss the consumer side of that.
No, not at all. I think we've got to go first to the leaders. I agree with you.
Well, and I advocated that we called this, you used a word earlier, that we call this episode the convenience crisis.
That's right.
Because I think you're absolutely right. It's so interesting that this is our behavior as human beings, is we choose the easy thing. And you can choose to eat an apple or, mac and cheese, and the thing that tastes better or whatever. That we choose to get things delivered to our homes. That we choose convenience regularly, when so often, like, the natural law of things is like, it's harder to go to the gym, but it's better for you. Right. It's harder to plan things with friends. It's better for you to be connected with other people. And it's not necessarily a voting with dollars sort of thing, but it's a aligning your decision-making with your values. Like, I value connection, and so I'm going to go to this grocery store as opposed to, get it delivered on Amazon. And so I do think that there is a real, the first place you should look is in the mirror, whether you're the leader of the organization or, a consumer of the products of that organization, and say, what am I willing to suffer for?
And let me be tough on myself and on our company first. So, because we have never thought that the job of the Table Group is to maximize our profit. And we have made decisions, and people have said to me for years, like, why don't you do this? You could make more money. And I don't want to claim that I was virtuous. I was not actually interested in doing those other things. We give away a lot of what we do to partners. We let other people make money off our stuff, and people say, well, you could control that and you could make a lot more money. And we're like, so I'm going to say right now, there may have been some virtue in that, but some of it was, I wasn't really interested in doing those things.
Yeah.
So I need to be fair and say, would I have willfully given away margin for the sake of other people's job satisfaction? And I think, Cody, we do that. And I think it's one of those things, because at the end of the day, more money is not as valuable as more opportunity for others and relationship. And I think that's the thing. Business is relational. And when we take people out of that equation, it's like we should stop calling it a company. You don't have a company anymore. You have a non-human organizational system.
Yeah. I think that's one of the keys I wanted to hone in on, Pat, because I think sometimes people distill this conversation down to, like, we want to protect jobs. It's not jobs and compensation that we're trying to protect. It's dignity and togetherness. We've often talked about, like, how meaningful it is as a human being to work on something with peers and with, like, friends and colleagues, and initiatives that, like, we're building something together and we're growing something together. So it's not, I think sometimes it gets distilled down to, oh, well, how are people going to afford things if the jobs go away? And it's far more, it's deeper and more nuanced than that, because it's really about the human connection and the human dignity of what it means to have a job.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? Did you ever see that movie called About a Boy years ago?
I know it. It's been many years, I'm sure.
Hugh, what's his name?
Jackman? No. Hugh Grant.
Hugh Grant. He was in it, and he's a guy whose dad wrote A Christmas Carol in England, and he made money on, he was a trust fund baby. He never worked and he was miserable. And I think about when people win the lottery and they don't work and they're not happy. And I'm thinking about what we're doing as a society. Imagine if we got so, imagine a town that discovered oil and everybody in the town never had to work again. It never leads to good things. People need to work and to see effort and to get the dignity of that and to work with others. And this idea that we're pursuing efficiency, and we might call it societal wealth, even if it meant we were going to pay for people to get free food because we got to be so successful as a society, that would be the destruction of human dignity. And I do think this is the first time in society that we're coming upon a moment where we might have to question whether the free market is going to serve humanity very well. Now, in days past, that's why unions came about, and that's why oil companies or coal companies, the coal mine dominated a town, and they needed to have a union. But who's thinking about the benefit of continuing to have jobs and interaction and the dignity of work? I know we're just restating the same thing, but this is really a struggle.
I think the other challenge, Pat, is to think about your grandchildren. Not, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's like, I think so much of this urgency and this race towards winning in whatever season, you know, like some of these guys are in their 50s and 60s and 70s, like they're still building these organizations. And it's like, to what cost for generations in front of us? And is our goal, like my goal as a dad is to not maximize my thriving, but my kids thriving, you know?
Right.
And I, if we could figure that out and take on that mantle as leaders of the free market, we should be thinking ahead. It's like you plant a tree, not for your own enjoyment, but for generations to come.
Yeah. And I would rather give my child a job than a stack of money so they didn't have to work.
Yeah.
Because there's value in that. You know, one of the things, Cody, that comes out of all this is the jobs that are going to get eliminated first are going to be the entry-level jobs. So you were not going to see 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds getting entry-level jobs. And people are going to go, where are they going to get their work ethic? Where are they going to get their sense of frugality and balance and all those other things? It's going to be a really interesting time. And for people that are listening to this, we don't want to just talk about how bad it is. The question is, what can you do? And I think we need to start speaking out. I think we need to speak out within our own companies to our leaders. And I think we need to think about the kind of purchasing we're doing. And just today, there's one of the companies that's driving this the most. Somebody said their wife said, we're not buying from them anymore. I'm certainly like that now. I'm thinking about, I don't think this is a pro workforce company. And I'm going to spend my money with someone else.
Yeah. And I hope that people, you know, we're on episode, I don't know, in the 200s, right? Mid 200s or something like that. We've been doing this for 4 years. I actually remember back to, I think it was in our first 10 episodes, the robot CEO idea was like the first Chinese company said,
Jack Ma in China
said, oh yeah. I often wonder at these organizations where these CEOs are leading these initiatives around, you know, artificial intelligence and artificial generative intelligence. Like, if your philosophy of business is that it's about margins and decision making and science, won't they get your job too? Like, if you're building a robot that's better at just, you know, going through all the data and making the best decisions, shouldn't they be the CEO as opposed to you? And should that not at least force them to have the conversation and say, what is the end goal here? You know, what is what's the cost of all of this?
Remember the old saying from Nazi Germany where they said first they came for the mentally ill, and I wasn't mentally ill, so I didn't do anything. And then they came for the Jews, and then the Catholics, and I wasn't one of them. And then at the end, it's like, and then they came for me, and there was nobody left to stand up for me. Well, we're hearing about industries that are getting wiped out that shouldn't be. Now, there's some things that are antiquated that need to be automated, but there's other things where these companies just don't seem to have a true north. We need to be standing up for the dignity of work even before it hits us.
Hmm.
We need to quit pushing this off, kicking the can down the street, and prioritizing our own convenience over what's good for society, because it's going to come for all of us. So this is not to be negative. It's just we see this car headed for a cliff. Let's jump in and stop it, and let's collectively decide we're going to make a decision that's for the greater good and not for some dystopian nightmare.
That's it.
And we can do that. And let's pray about that, because that's the thing. We have to pray for what's best. All righty. All right. Thanks for listening to us. We will look forward to talking to you next time on At the Table. God bless.